Now let me define the components of the foreground question. A foreground question has these four components, namely the P, I, C, and O. PICO, famously known as PICO, this acronym, the patient, situation, population, or problem. So unfortunately, all starting with P, the P stays for either patient, population, or problem. Then we have an intervention or exposure. Therefore, sometimes you may come to hear that it is called PICO instead of PICO, depending on whether you have an intervention or exposure. But doesn't matter. So I or E, it is one group of people. One group of people. And then you need another group to compare, of course, another intervention or another exposure to compare. And finally, the most important actually is the outcome of interest. What are you measuring? It must be something measurable. What are you behind? What would you like to know at the end of your question, of your study, of your research? What you want to change? Okay. So once more, these four essential components: patient, population, intervention, exposure, tests, comparison, and outcomes. Outcomes can be also time relevant when possible. However, the scientists love it to make it complicated, this PICO can be sometimes PICO can sometimes be extended to PICO-TT, namely T meaning the type of question. You already know it, background or foreground questions, background or foreground, or the type of article or study or research. And you already, from the previous session, you should have some information about the type of studies. What were the type of studies? The case control, cohort, RCT, meta-analysis, etc. Cross-sectional studies, repeated cross-sectional studies. But also what clinical situation you are examining with your study. And this last time we mentioned, we may be behind 4 objectives. Either we are dealing with therapy, diagnosis, prognosis, or harm studies. So this, if you include these components in your question, it becomes PICO-TT. Okay, here one example before making another break. In a patient with dementia of unknown etiology, does the use of cholinesterase inhibitors compared with placebo or no treatment result in clinical improvement for the patient or of the patient? If you hear this kind of sentence, imagine this is one sentence without these breaks, then you should easily understand that the 4 components, the first component, P, is patients with dementia, or better, or in detail, dementia of unknown etiology, but dementia would be enough. Then the intervention and comparison, you must be comparing at least 2 conditions. It may be more than 2. Here you have cholinesterase inhibitors compared with placebo or no treatment. This is the same, placebo or no treatment. So 2 comparisons, 2 groups. You could switch these groups. That would not make much difference. You could have here, instead of a negative treatment, you could have an active treatment, positive comparison group. Then it would not make any change if you, instead of intervention, you mention that cholinesterase inhibitors are the comparison group. Lastly, clinical improvement. Improvement, by improvement, you must, in the outcome, must be something measurable. It should be, we should be able to measure this outcome. How can you measure clinical improvement? How, if it is daily activities, then it should be, you should have some measures for that. doing daily activities, the muscle power, the mental conditions, the satisfaction, level of pain. These are all, to some extent, measurable entities, or it could be also a laboratory measurement, of course, but in this case, we don't have, I don't know, any laboratory measure or tests to measure improvement in dementia. But mini-mental test, for example, MMT, mini-mental test, is one test the doctors apply frequently to follow up or to diagnose the dementia. Okay, I hope this was enough. Next, we will have some more examples to make it clear. But first, let me make a stop recording.